My daughter hadn't replied for a week, so I drove to her house. My son-in-law insisted she was on a trip. I almost believed him until I heard a muffled moan coming from the locked garage. I circled back, tried the side door, and the sound coming from that dark concrete room didn't just scare me. It broke me as a mother in a way I will never forget. It was exactly 4:12 p.m. on a Tuesday in late August when I pulled my 2019 Volvo XC60 into the driveway of the sprawling, pristine colonial house at 4202 Maple Ridge Drive. The thermometer on my dashboard read 94 degrees Fahrenheit, a stifling, humid heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt. I turned off the ignition, but I did not get out immediately. I sat there for 30 seconds, gripping the steering wheel, trying to quiet the frantic rhythm of my heart, which was currently beating at roughly 110 beats per minute. My daughter, Sarah, had not responded to a text message, a phone call, or an email in 7 days. This was a statistical anomaly that defied the entire history of our relationship. Sarah was a woman of communication. She was a 34-year-old digital marketing executive who lived with her phone glued to her palm, who responded to my messages within an average window of 14 minutes. Silence was not her language. Silence was a void, and in my experience as a retired emergency room nurse practitioner with 32 years of experience in trauma units, silence usually meant that the patient was no longer capable of screaming. I looked at the house. It was perfect. The lawn was manicured to a uniform height of 2 inches. The hydrangeas were blooming in obedient blue spheres. It was the domestic empire of my son-in-law, Caleb. Caleb was a man who worked in high-end asset management, a title that seemed to involve wearing $3,000 suits and talking loudly about market volatility while checking his reflection in silverware. I had never liked him. I had tolerated him because Sarah loved him, or thought she did, and because he had isolated her so thoroughly that criticizing him felt like cutting the last thread, connecting me to her. I stepped out of the car, the heat hitting me like a physical blow. I walked to the front door, a heavy mahogany slab with a brass knocker that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. I rang the bell. I waited exactly 45 seconds before ringing it again. I heard footsteps, heavy and confident. The door opened. Caleb stood there. He was wearing a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows and holding a tumbler of amber liquid that smelled of expensive scotch. He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It stopped at his mouth, a practiced muscular contraction that conveyed zero warmth. "Oh, Helen," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. "I didn't know you were coming by. You should have called." I looked at him, analyzing his pupil dilation, his posture. He was relaxed, too relaxed for a man whose wife had been missing for a week. "I did call, Caleb," I said, my voice steady, utilizing the tone I used to use when triage nurses were panicking. "I called Sarah 12 times. I called you 4 times. Neither of you answered. Where is she?" Caleb took a sip of his drink, leaning casually against the doorframe. "I told you, Helen. She's on a trip. She needed a reset. She went to that wellness retreat in Sedona, the one with the silent meditation. No phones allowed. She'll be back on Sunday." I stared at him. The lie was smooth, but it lacked the texture of truth. Sarah hated meditation. Sarah had vertigo and hated flying. And Sarah would never, ever leave her golden retriever, Buster, without giving me a detailed itinerary of his feeding schedule. "Can I see the itinerary?" I asked. "Can I see the flight confirmation?" Caleb sighed, the sound of a man dealing with a slow child. "Helen, look, I don't monitor her every move. She booked it herself. She wanted space. Maybe she wanted space from you." He took a step back, starting to close the door. "Listen, I'm in the middle of a call with a client in Tokyo. I can't do this right now. Go home. Wait until Sunday. She'll call you when she's ready." The door clicked shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood on the porch, staring at the wood grain. My instincts, honed by 3 decades of assessing trauma, were screaming. He was lying. I walked back to my car, but I did not leave. I drove around the block and parked 3 houses down, in front of a neighbor's hedge. I waited. I watched the house through the rearview mirror. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew I couldn't leave. The silence from Sarah wasn't just unusual, it was terrifying. At 5:05 p.m., I exited my car. I walked back toward the house, but I stayed on the sidewalk, moving toward the side gate that led to the backyard. I knew the code to the gate, 1989, Sarah's birth year, because I had watered the plants while they were in Cabo last year. I punched it in. The latch clicked. I slipped into the backyard. It was deserted. The pool was still, the water a brilliant chemical blue. The blinds on the rear windows were drawn tight. And then I heard it. It was faint, barely audible over the hum of the pool filter and the distant drone of a lawnmower. A sound. A low, rhythmic sound coming from the direction of the detached garage. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was organic. I stopped. I held my breath. I listened. It came again. It was a moan. A sound of distress. The sound of a human being in pain who has no energy left to scream. I walked toward the garage. It was a 3-car structure, separate from the main house, where Caleb kept his toys, a vintage Porsche, a set of golf clubs worth $4,000, and a woodworking bench he never used. The side door of the garage was locked. I tried the handle. It didn't budge. I put my ear against the metal door. The heat radiating off the door was intense. Inside, it must have been over 100 degrees. "Sarah?" I whispered. Help! The word was so weak it was almost a vibration rather than a sound. But it was her voice. It was Sarah. The realization hit me with the force of a collision. My daughter was in there. Caleb had said she was in Sedona. Caleb had lied. Caleb had locked her in a non-ventilated garage in 94-degree heat. I looked around for a way in. There were no windows on the side. I ran to the back of the garage. There was a small, high window, painted shut. I looked for a rock. I found a decorative river stone in the landscaping border. I picked it up. It weighed about 5 pounds. I smashed the window. The glass shattered inward. I cleared the shards with my elbow, ignoring the scratch that drew blood on my forearm. I climbed up on a stack of potting soil bags and peered inside. The garage was dim, lit only by the sliver of light from the window I had just broken. The air that rushed out smelled of gasoline, old oil, and something else, something sharp and biological. Ammonia. Urine. I let my eyes adjust. I saw the Porsche. I saw the workbench, and then I saw her. Sarah was lying on the concrete floor in the far corner, near the water heater. She was zip-tied. Her hands were bound behind her back. Her ankles were bound together. She was wearing a torn t-shirt and sweatpants. She looked gray. Her skin was the color of ash. I scrambled through the window, dropping 6 feet to the concrete floor, jarring my knees. I didn't feel the pain. I ran to her. Sarah! I fell to my knees beside her. Her eyes were open, but they were unfocused, rolling slightly in her head. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. I touched her forehead. It was burning. She was febrile. At least 104 degrees. Heat stroke, dehydration. Sarah, honey, can you hear me? I asked, my hands moving automatically to check her radial pulse. It was thready and rapid tachycardic, around 130. Mom? She rasped. Water. I looked around. There was a utility sink in the corner. I grabbed a dirty mug from the workbench, filled it with tap water, and brought it to her lips. Not too much, I commanded gently. Just sips. She tried to gulp it, water spilling down her chin. I saw the bruising then. A massive purple hematoma on the side of her face, swelling the eye shut. And her leg. Her left leg was at an unnatural angle. The tibia was clearly fractured, the skin tented but not broken. A closed fracture, likely days old, judging by the swelling and discoloration. Oh my God, I whispered. How long, Sarah? How long have you been here? Thursday, she whispered. He pushed me down the stairs. Thursday. It was Tuesday. She had been in this garage with a broken leg and no water for 5 days. 5 days in the heat. While he drank scotch and told me she was in Sedona, this wasn't just domestic abuse. This was attempted murder. This was torture. I needed to get her out. Now, I looked at the zip ties. They were thick, industrial grade. I couldn't break them. I ran to the workbench. I found a pair of tin snips. I ran back. I cut the ties on her ankles. I cut the ties on her wrists. Her hands were swollen and blue. The circulation had been compromised. We have to go, I said. I'm going to lift you. It's going to hurt. No, she whimpered. He'll kill me. He said he'd kill me if I made noise. He is not going to kill you, I said, my voice dropping to a register of cold, absolute fury that I had never used in my life, because I am going to kill him if he comes near us. I put my arm under her shoulders. I lifted. She screamed. A high, thin sound of agony as the broken leg shifted. I dragged her toward the side door. I unlocked it from the inside. It was a deadbolt that required a key from the outside, but a thumb turn from the inside. I threw the door open. The fresh air hit us, and so did Caleb. He was standing there, at the corner of the garage, holding a pitching wedge. He must have heard the glass break or the scream. He looked at me, and then at Sarah, and his face didn't show guilt. It showed annoyance. It showed the irritation of a man whose project had been interrupted. Helen, put her down, he said, raising the golf club. You don't understand. She's sick. She's mentally ill. She attacked me. I had to restrain her for her own safety. I'm waiting for the specialist to arrive. I looked at him. I looked at the $300 haircut and the linen shirt. I shifted my weight, placing myself between him and my broken daughter. I measured the distance between us, 6 feet. He had a club. I had the tin snips in my right hand. They were 10 inches long, drop-forged steel, with a sharpened beak. Caleb, I said, my voice, devoid of fear, devoid of humanity, filled only with the physics of violence. I was a trauma nurse for 30 years. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to sever a femoral artery. I know exactly where the jugular vein sits behind the sternocleidomastoid muscle. If you take one step closer to me, I will open your throat before you can swing that club. He hesitated. He saw something in my eyes. He saw the mother who had just found her child in a cage. He saw the end of his world. He lowered the club slightly. Helen, be reasonable. We can talk about this. I didn't talk. I helped Sarah up, bearing her weight. We shuffled past him. He didn't move. He was a bully, and bullies are terrified of consequences. And I was the consequence. We made it to the gate. We made it to the car. I put her in the passenger seat, reclining it fully. I locked the doors. I started the engine. I looked back at the house. Caleb was standing in the driveway, watching us, his phone in his hand. He was probably calling his lawyer. I put the car in drive. I didn't drive home. I drove toward the level 1 trauma center where I used to work. I drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand holding Sarah's clammy, trembling hand. I checked the time, 5:28 p.m. The rescue was over. The war had just begun. And as I merged onto the highway, watching the heat waves distort the horizon, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Caleb thought he had broken her, but he had only managed to wake me up, and he had no idea what a fully awake, medically trained, and righteously vengeful mother was capable of. The moan in the garage would be the last sound he ever controlled. controlled. The drive to Street Jude's medical center took 22 minutes. I drove at 85 miles per hour, weaving through the rush hour traffic with a focus that narrowed the world down to the road ahead and the shallow breathing of my daughter beside me. I didn't cry. I didn't speak words of comfort that were lies. I spoke vitals. Stay with me, Sarah. Keep your eyes open. Squeeze my hand. I monitored her constantly. Her skin was hot and dry, anhidrosis, a sign of severe heat stroke. She was drifting in and out of consciousness. When we pulled into the ambulance bay, I didn't go to the public entrance. I went to the bay where the paramedics unloaded. I slammed the car into park and jumped out. I knew the charge nurse, a woman named Maria, who had been a rookie when I was a supervisor. I banged on the glass doors. Maria looked up, saw me, saw the desperation in my face, and hit the door release. I screamed for a gurney. "Get a trauma team, now!" I yelled, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. Heat stroke, possible sepsis, open fracture history, dehydration times 5 days. The language of the ER took over. It was a shield. It kept the horror at bay. A team swarmed the car. They pulled Sarah out. I watched them cut off her clothes. I saw the extent of the damage in the harsh fluorescent lights of Trauma Bay 1. She wasn't just bruised, she was emaciated. Her hip bones jutted out. There were ligature marks on her wrists, so deep they had ulcerated. There were burns on her back. Cigarette burns? No. Electrical burns. Small, circular lesions. Caleb hadn't just neglected her. He had hurt her systematically. I stood in the corner of the trauma room, shaking, my clothes covered in dust and sweat, while Dr. Evans, the attending physician, shouted orders. 2 liters of saline, stat. Get a CT of the head and chest. Ortho to the room for the tib-fib fracture. Call the police. I stepped forward then. I am the mother, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I am also a retired no problem. I want a full rape kit. I want a toxicology screen for everything, sedatives, paralysis agents, antifreeze. And I want the police here now. Not a patrol officer. I want Detective Miller. I knew Miller. He was Special Victims Unit. He had a daughter Sarah's age. Dr. Evans looked at me, recognizing me for the first time. Helen? Jesus Christ. Is this Sarah? I nodded. He looked at her broken body, then back at me. Who did this? He asked quietly. I looked him in the eye. Her husband, Caleb Vance. The next 6 hours were a procedural blur. Sarah was stabilized, intubated to protect her airway, and taken to surgery to set the leg and decompress the swelling in her brain from the dehydration. I sat in the waiting room with Detective Miller. I gave him everything. I gave him the timeline. I gave him the text messages that had gone unanswered. I gave him the description of the garage. I gave him the tin snips I had used, now sitting in an evidence bag. Miller took notes, his face hardening with every detail. We need a warrant to get back into that garage, he said. If he's smart, he's cleaning it out right now. He's smart, I said. He's arrogant. He thinks he can explain it away. He thinks she's mentally ill. That's what he told me. Miller stood up. We'll get a judge. We'll get the warrant. You stay here with her. I didn't stay in the waiting room. I went up to the ICU. I sat by her bed. She was a tangle of tubes and wires. The ventilator hissed rhythmically. I looked at her face, swollen and purple, and I felt the cold, hard crystallization of my resolve. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about destruction. Caleb Vance was a man who cared about 2 things, his money and his image. He had tried to kill my daughter to protect one or both. I opened my laptop, which I had retrieved from the car. I connected to the hospital Wi-Fi. I wasn't going to wait for the police to build a case. The police were slow. The law was cumbersome. I needed to know why. Why Thursday? What happened on Thursday that made him push her down the stairs and lock her away? I logged into Sarah's iCloud account. I knew her password. She used the name of her first pony plus her birth year. I accessed her photos, her notes, her emails. I started with the days leading up to Thursday. There were normal photos. The dog, a sunset, a salad, and then, on Wednesday night, there was a photo of a document. It was blurry, taken in haste. It looked like a bank statement. I zoomed in. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a life insurance policy. A new one, dated 3 weeks ago. Policy value, $5 million. Beneficiary, Caleb Vance. And there was another document, a screenshot of a text message on a phone that wasn't hers, likely Caleb's phone that she had snapped a picture of. The text was from a contact named Vegas. It read, "You have until Friday, Caleb, or we take the knees. Pay up." The narrative reassembled itself in my mind with terrifying clarity. Caleb was in debt, gambling debt, deep debt. He had taken out a policy on Sarah. He had planned to kill her, likely a staged accident on the stairs, collect the $5 million, and pay off Vegas. But the fall didn't kill her. It just broke her leg, and he panicked. He couldn't call 911 because she was conscious. She knew he pushed her. So he locked her in the garage to let the heat finish the job. He was waiting for her to die of natural causes, heat stroke, dehydration, so he could claim she had a mental break, wandered into the garage, got locked in, and died. It was a clumsy, brutal plan, born of desperation, and I had interrupted it. I looked at the digital evidence. This was the motive. This was the nail in the coffin. But I wasn't going to just hand it to Miller. I was going to ensure that even if he wriggled out of the criminal charges, he had high-priced lawyers. He could claim the texts were fake. He could claim she was suicidal. He would be destroyed in the court of public opinion. He would be destroyed socially, financially, totally. I downloaded the files. I backed them up to 3 different cloud servers. Then I looked up Caleb's firm, Vance and Partners Wealth Management. I looked up his partners. I looked up his biggest clients. I began to draft an email. I didn't send it yet. I saved it as a draft. I needed to confirm he was in custody reality first. I checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. My phone rang. It was Miller. "We got him," Miller said. "He was at the house. He was scrubbing the garage floor with bleach. We found the zip ties in the trash. He's in cuffs. He's asking for his lawyer." "Good," I said. "Is he charged?" "Attempted murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault. No bail recommended." I hung up. I looked at Sarah. She was still asleep, sedated, safe. I smoothed her hair back from her uninjured temple. I closed my laptop. I wasn't done. Arrest wasn't enough. Prison wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in, just like she did. I wanted him to suffocate. The next morning, the sun rose over the hospital skyline, painting the room in soft pinks that felt offensive given the violence of the night. Sarah woke up at 10 a.m. They extubated her. Her throat was raw. She couldn't speak above a whisper. Her first words were, "Is he gone?" I held her hand. "He is in a cage, Sarah. He is never coming back." She wept then, silent tears that tracked through the antiseptic cream on her face. I let her cry. I waited until the doctors had checked her, until the pain meds were adjusted. Then, I asked the question, "Sarah, I found the photo of the insurance policy and the text from Vegas. Is that why?" She nodded slowly. He lost everything," she whispered. "Crypto, betting. He stole my retirement fund. All of it. I found out on Wednesday. I told him I was leaving. I told him I was calling the police." She took a shuddering breath. "He grabbed me. He said I was worth more dead. He threw me down the basement stairs first. Then he dragged me to the garage, the basement. The police hadn't checked the basement. There would be evidence there too. Blood, DNA. He kept coming in," she whispered, her eyes wide with the memory. "Every day. He would come in with a water bottle and drink it in front of me. He asked if I was dead yet. He said he bet on the day I would die. I felt a physical sickness, a nausea so profound I had to sit down. He had bet on the timing of her death. He was gamifying her murder." I left the room. I walked into the hallway. I needed air. I needed to execute the next phase. I called Miller. "Check the basement," I said. "That's the primary crime scene." "And, Miller, look into his gambling accounts." The text said, "Vegas." Miller grunted. "We're on it. We found his ledger. He owes $3 million to a syndicate. He's done, Helen. He's going away for life. Life was good. But life in prison takes time. Trials take years. Appeals take decades. I wanted immediate destruction. I went to the hospital cafeteria. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the draft email. It was addressed to the board of directors of Vance and Partners and BCC'd to the local press, the national financial news outlets, and every single client listed on his firm's website, which I had scraped earlier. The subject line was "Criminal Indictment and Financial Fraud. Caleb Vance." I attached the photo of the text message from the loan shark. I attached the police report number. I attached a redacted photo of Sarah in the ICU, just her hand, bound and bruised, with the hospital bracelet visible. I wrote a brief clinical summary of the facts. Caleb Vance has been arrested for the attempted murder of his wife to collect on a fraudulent insurance policy to cover gambling debts totaling $3 million. He has been embezzling client funds to service this debt. Please see attached evidence. It was the nuclear option. It would destroy his firm. It would destroy his partners who likely looked the other way. It would ensure that even if he made bail, he would have no assets, no job, and no friends. I hovered my finger over the send button. I thought about the moan in the garage. I thought about him drinking water in front of her dying body. I pressed send. By 2 p.m., the news broke. Wealth manager arrested in torture plot. Hedge fund CEO accused of attempted wife murder for insurance payout. The headlines screamed across the monitors in the hospital waiting room. I watched as the reporters gathered outside the hospital, a sea of microphones and cameras. I didn't go down. I went back to Sarah's room. She was watching the TV, the sound off. She looked at me. "You did this?" she asked, gesturing to the news ticker. I nodded. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the clients?" "It's all true," I said. "He's bankrupt, Sarah, and now everyone knows. He has no money for a dream team defense. He'll be stuck with a public defender." She closed her eyes. A small, grim smile touched her cracked lips. "Good," she whispered. "I hope he rots." I stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. I didn't leave her side. I managed her pain meds. I managed the police interviews. I managed the lawyers. I was the gatekeeper. Caleb was denied bail. The judge cited the flight risk and the depraved cruelty of the crime. He was sitting in the county lockup in general population. I heard from Miller that he wasn't doing well. The other inmates didn't take kindly to men who tortured women. He had been beaten up twice. I felt zero sympathy. It was just procedural justice. When Sarah was discharged, she came home to my house. We didn't go back to the Colonial on Maple Ridge Drive. That house was a crime scene, and soon it would be seized by the bank or the government. She came to my quiet, small house with the garden she grew up in. She was in a wheelchair. Her leg would take months to heal. Her spirit would take longer, but she was alive. 6 months later, the trial began. It was a spectacle, but it was a short one. The evidence was overwhelming. The Vegas texts, the garage video footage. Miller found a neighbor's security camera that caught Caleb dragging a rug to the garage on Thursday night. The medical testimony. Caleb looked small in the courtroom. He had lost weight. He had lost his hair. He wouldn't look at us. Sarah took the stand. She walked with a cane now. She looked him in the eye. She told the jury about the heat, about the thirst, about the betting. The jury was out for less than an hour. Guilty. Life without parole, plus 30 years for the financial crimes. When the verdict was read, Caleb finally looked back. He looked at me. His eyes were dead, empty holes. I held his gaze. I didn't smile. I just nodded, acknowledging the transaction was complete. The debt was paid. We are sitting on my porch now. It is a year later. It is August again, but the heat is different here. It's a gentle warmth, not a stifling oven. Sarah is walking without the cane, though she has a limp when it rains. She is working again, consulting from home. She adopted a new dog, a rescue pit bull named Chance, who sleeps at her feet and growls if a man comes too close. We don't talk about Caleb. He is a ghost, a bad memory locked in a concrete box in a supermax prison in the desert. We talk about the future. We talk about the garden. I look at my daughter, drinking a glass of iced tea, the condensation dripping down the glass. I watch her swallow the cold liquid, savoring it. I will never take the sound of someone drinking water for granted again. I realized that day in the garage that a mother's job isn't just to nurture. Sometimes, a mother's job is to be the monster that fights the other monsters. I was a good nurse, but I am a better nightmare. And as long as I am breathing, no one will ever lock my daughter in the dark again. The garage is empty, the silence is broken, and we are in the light. It has been 5 years, 3 months, and 2 days since I broke the window of that garage. The passage of time is usually measured in milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, promotions, but in the aftermath of violence, time is measured in the slow, agonizing erosion of memory. For the first 2 years, Sarah flinched when the ice maker dropped cubes into the tray. She woke up screaming if the air conditioning unit hummed at a specific frequency. But time, aided by aggressive therapy and the relentless love of a mother who refused to let the darkness win, has done its work. The sharp edges of the trauma have been sanded down. Sarah is 39 now. She is the director of a nonprofit organization called The Open Door, which provides emergency housing and legal funds for victims of financial abuse. She took the wreckage of her life and built a lighthouse. We still live together in my house, but the dynamic has shifted. I am no longer the nurse and she the patient. We are roommates, partners in a quiet, peaceful life. But there was one final loose end, one last tether to the man rotting in the high desert prison that needed to be severed. It arrived on a Tuesday, the same day of the week I found her. A letter from the Department of Corrections. It wasn't for Sarah. I had ensured years ago that her address was shielded and that all correspondence went through a P.O. box I monitored. The letter was addressed to me. It was a notification. Inmate 89,402B, Caleb Vance, had been transferred to the palliative care unit. He had been diagnosed with end-stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was weeks, perhaps days. He had put me on his visitation list. He wanted to see Helen, not Sarah, Helen. The audacity was breathtaking, but consistent with his pathology. He knew Sarah wouldn't come. He knew I was the architect of his destruction. He wanted an audience for his final performance. I didn't tell Sarah about the letter. I put it in my purse. I told her I was going to a medical conference in Denver for the weekend. I packed my bag, booked a flight, and rented a car. I needed to see him. Not to offer forgiveness, that is a currency I do not possess for men like him, but to verify. I needed to see with my own eyes that the monster was truly fading. I needed to close the book. The drive to the prison was long and desolate, the landscape of dry scrub and red rock mirroring the emptiness I felt when I thought of him. The facility was a fortress of concrete and razor wire, sterilized and cold. The processing took 2 hours. I went through metal detectors, patted down by guards who looked bored by the parade of tragedy that passed through their gates. Finally, I was led to the infirmary ward. It wasn't the glass-partitioned visiting room of the movies. It was a secure room with a hospital bed, a guard stationed at the door, and the smell of antiseptic masking, the scent of decay. Caleb lay in the bed. He was unrecognizable. The man who had worn $3,000 suits and obsessively manicured his nails was gone. In his place was a skeletal figure, his skin jaundiced and paper-thin, his hair gone. He was hooked up to a morphine drip, but when I walked in, his eyes opened. They were sunken, yellowed, but they still held that spark of narcissistic calculation. He tried to smile, but it was a grimace. "Helen," he rasped, his voice a dry rattle. "You came." I stood at the foot of the bed. I didn't sit. I kept my coat on, a barrier between us. "I came to check the vitals, Caleb," I said clinically. "Old habits," he chuckled, a wet coughing sound. "You always were. Efficient. How is she? Does she ask about me?" I looked at him, analyzing the manipulation. He wanted to know he still mattered. He wanted to know he had left a scar. "She doesn't ask about you, Caleb," I said. "She doesn't speak your name. In our house, you are not a memory. You are a typo. A clerical error," we corrected. His face tightened. "Don't lie to me. I was her husband. I made her. She was nothing before me, and she's nothing without me. I bet she's still afraid of the dark. I bet she still checks the locks 10 times a night." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't make her, Caleb. You tried to unmake her, and you failed. She isn't afraid of the dark anymore. She owns the dark. She helps other women navigate it. She used the settlement money, the money from the liquidation of your firm, to start a foundation. Every time a woman escapes a man like you, it's funded by the assets you tried to kill her for. Your greed is literally financing your own enemies. It's quite poetic." The monitor beeped faster. His heart rate was rising. The anger was still there, fueling him even as his organs failed. "You stole my life," he hissed. "You turned her against me. I was going to fix it. I had a plan. The insurance. It was just a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. I would have treated her like a queen once the debt was gone." I stepped closer, leaning in so he could see the absolute lack of pity in my eyes. "You were going to kill her, Caleb. You watched her dying in a garage and drank water in front of her. Don't rewrite history for me. I was there. I saw saw the zip ties. I saw the burns. You aren't a victim. You are a pathogen. And like any pathogen, you have been isolated and neutralized. He stared at me, his breathing shallow. Why did you come? He whispered. If you hate me so much, why are you here? To watch me die? No, I said. I've seen enough death. It doesn't impress me. I came to tell you that you are forgotten. When you die, there will be no funeral, no obituary. The state will cremate you and bury the ashes in a pauper's plot with a number, not a name. Sarah won't know the exact day. I won't tell her. One day, you will just cease to exist in the world, and the sun will keep rising, and she will keep laughing, and the garden will keep growing. You are ending, Caleb, but we are continuing. I turned to leave. He tried to reach out, his hands shaking, the IV lines pulling taut. Helen, wait. I'm scared. It's dark. I stopped at the door. I didn't turn back. I remembered the garage. I remembered the darkness he had forced my daughter into. I remembered her plea for water. I reached for the light switch on the wall. It is dark, Caleb, I said. That's the point. I flipped the switch, plunging the room into the dim gray of the security lights. I walked out into the corridor, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind me with a finality that felt like a benediction. I flew home that night. When I pulled into the driveway, it was late, past midnight. The house was quiet. I let myself in. Buster, the golden retriever, greeted me with a sleepy wag of his tail. Chance, the pit bull, lifted his head from the rug and went back to sleep, secure in his duty. I walked into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. Sarah was there. She was sitting at the island, wearing her reading glasses, reviewing case files for the foundation. She looked up as I entered. She didn't look surprised. She looked at my coat, at the weariness in my face. You went to see him, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I froze for a second, then nodded. I couldn't lie to her. We had promised no more lies. Yes, I said. He's dying. Pancreatic cancer. It won't be long. Sarah took a sip of her tea. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just looked at the steam rising from her mug. Did he suffer? She asked. I hesitated. He is in pain. He is afraid. She nodded slowly, processing this. Good, she said. I poured my water. I drank it. Is that it? Sarah asked. Is it over? It's over, I confirmed. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Not even with his memory. Sarah closed the file folder in front of her. She stood up and walked over to me. She looked me in the eye, eyes that were clear, bright, and unbroken. Thank you, Mom, she said, for going, so I didn't have to. I hugged her then. A fierce, solid embrace. We stood there in the kitchen, two women who had walked through fire and come out the other side, smelling of smoke but carrying the water. The next morning, I went out to the garden. It was spring. The hydrangeas were waking up. The soil was rich and dark. I had work to do. I spent the morning weeding, pulling up the invasive vines that tried to choke the healthy plants. I thought about the nature of weeds. They are opportunistic. They exploit weakness, but they are shallow-rooted. With enough diligence, you can remove them. You can clear the ground. I planted new bulbs that day. Tulips, daffodils, resilience. I washed the dirt from my hands at the garden hose, watching the water run clear. The phone rang inside the house. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to answer it. I knew what the call would be. I knew that miles away, a number had been retired. I sat on the bench, wiped my hands on my apron, and closed my eyes, listening to the wind in the trees, the sound of my daughter laughing on the phone in her office, and the beating of my own steady heart. The audit was closed. The balance was restored, and the view from here was magnificent. 10 years is a long time in the life of a garden, but a short time in the life of a legacy. I am 82 years old now. My hands, once steady enough to insert an IV catheter into a dehydrated vein in a moving ambulance, now tremble slightly when I hold my teacup. But my mind remains a steel trap, and my resolve is as calcified as the ancient oak tree that anchors my backyard. The Open Door Foundation, which Sarah started with the blood money from Caleb's liquidated firm, has grown beyond our wildest calculations. It is no longer just a local initiative. It is a national force. We have shelters in 4 states. We have a legal team that strikes terror into the hearts of abusive spouses in divorce courts across the country. And today, we are celebrating a decade of survival. The gala is being held at the Metro Arts Center. It is a black tie affair. Tickets cost $1,000 a plate, and we are sold out. I am sitting at the head table, wearing a silk gown that Sarah insisted on buying for me. It is navy blue, severe and elegant. Sarah is at the podium. She looks radiant. She is 49, and the lines on her face are lines of laughter and hard work, not fear. She is telling the story, our story. For years, we kept the details private, shielding ourselves from the voyeurism of the public. But tonight, Sarah decided it was time to weaponize the narrative. She is projecting the photo of the garage on the massive screen behind her. The gasps from the audience are audible. She isn't doing it for pity. She is doing it for proof. My mother didn't just break a window that day, Sarah says into the microphone, her voice amplified and steady. She broke a cycle. She taught me that waiting for rescue is a gamble, but becoming the rescue is a guarantee. The applause is thunderous. I watch her, and I feel a swelling in my chest that feels dangerously like pride. But as the applause dies down, a young woman approaches my table. She is wearing a press badge. She looks nervous. Mrs. Vance? She asks. I'm writing a profile for the Times about the anniversary. I was wondering if I could ask you, do you ever think about him? Caleb, do you wonder if you were too harsh? The table goes quiet. The donors nearby strain to listen. It is the question that soft-hearted people always ask. The people who believe that every villain has a sad backstory that that justifies their cruelty. I look at the young journalist. I set down my teacup. I don't tremble. My dear, I say, my voice carrying the weight of 82 years of unblinking observation. I was a trauma nurse. I have seen what happens when you leave necrotic tissue in a wound because you are afraid of the pain of cutting it out. It spreads. It kills the host. Caleb was necrosis. I didn't remove him because I was harsh. I removed him because I wanted my daughter to live. Do I think about him? No. I think about the women who are alive today because his money is paying for their legal defense. I think about the math of survival, and the math tells me I was exactly harsh enough. The journalist blinks, scribbles furiously, and retreats. I look back at the stage. Sarah is introducing the keynote speaker, a woman named Maria, who we helped escape a financial prison similar to Sarah's 3 years ago. Maria is crying, thanking the foundation. I look around the room. I see the faces of the women we have helped. I see the lawyers we pay. I see the future we built from the ashes of a garage in August. Later that night, Sarah drives me home. The silence in the car is comfortable. We pull into the driveway of my small house. The garden is illuminated by solar lights, casting soft shadows on the hydrangeas. Sarah turns off the engine but doesn't open the door. Mom, she says softly, I'm thinking about expanding to Europe. There's a partner in London who wants to open a branch. Do it, I say immediately. Evil doesn't respect borders. Neither should we. She laughs, a sound that still feels like a miracle to me. You're tired, Mom. I can see it. You don't have to come to the board meetings anymore. You don't have to read the case files. I've got this. We've got this. I look at her. She is telling me it is time to retire. Not from life, but from the war. She is telling me that the general can finally put down her sword because the army is strong enough to fight without her. It is a terrifying thought, letting go. But as I look at the strength in her jaw, a strength she forged in the fire I helped pull her from, I realize she is right. I am tired, I admit, the words feeling strange on my tongue. But it is a good tired. It is the tired of a job finished. I pat her hand. I will skip the meetings, but I will keep the garden. Someone has to make sure the weeds don't come back. She squeezes my hand. Deal. I walk into my house. I go to my bedroom. On the nightstand, there is a framed photo. It isn't a picture of Sarah and me. It is a picture of the tin snips I used that day. I kept them, not as a trophy, but as a tool. I pick them up, feeling the cold steel. They are heavy. I open the bottom drawer of my dresser, where I keep my winter woolens. I place the snips inside, deep at the bottom, under the sweaters. I close the drawer. I undress and get into bed. The sheets are cool. The house is quiet. The garage is empty. Caleb is dust. Sarah is a fortress. And I am just Helen. I close my eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, I don't check the clock. I don't listen for the sound of a window breaking. I simply, finally, sleep.